So today we have a slightly different video. I think I'm going to get myself into another research project here. At least I'm going to give it the old college try and see if anything comes of it. There is a species of skipper, the two-spotted skipper, that is known from only one site in South Carolina. And as far as we know, it's been extirpated from the state. And I just learned that it was only known from one site in the state just yesterday. And it turns out that that one site is within like 3 miles of where I grew up. And I know the area well and have some hunt, and the exact location of the site, as far as I'm aware, has been lost. And I believe the site has been developed, at least partially, because development has been crazy in the area. And I'm interested to try and find where that site is, or at least where it was. The man who discovered it and kept up with it, documented it, he passed away 15 years ago, and I don't think anyone knows the exact location of the site, but the descriptions I have are just north of the intersection of Highway 17A and Interstate 26 in Summerville, South Carolina. And, being a local to the area, I have some hunches on where the site might be, but I'm interested to put my GIS skills as well as my sort of landscape investigative skills to the test and see if I can figure out where this property actually was, or at least where this site actually was. The two-spotted skipper is a large skipper, and it feeds on sedges. There's one species of sedge listed as its host plant, but I'm sure it uses a wide range. It definitely uses carrot species. The species that's listed as its host plant on the Pomona site is not found in South Carolina, so it obviously uses something else, and it obviously uses something else down in Georgia and Florida and all the other places it's been seen. It's not a horribly, rare or critically endangered species, but it is essentially extirpated from South Carolina until someone finds a new population. It's just coincidentally that population is like 3 miles from where my house was. So I'd be curious to see if they're still there. I don't know the last time they were seen. I think it was in the 90s. And development has been insane in that area. Not only from, the 70s onward, but just in the last 10 years. So I'm going to poke around, see what I can find. And I think I'm going to try and do some screen recording here and show you some of the other, just what I'm working with here at the very beginning. I've still got to find GIS data layers. I got to get a digital elevation model. But I'm currently just sort of comparing historical imagery and seeing what I can find. All right, we're going to test out this real quick. Ignore the other men in the mirrors. So here is the lecture where I learned this from. I don't know if this is going to pick up the audio or not, but this is Dr. Brian Schultens over at College of Charleston, and he was giving a presentation about butterfly conservation in the state. And here he goes into the two-spotted
We also
skipper.
seem to have lost the two-spotted skipper. This is a really nice woodland wetland skipper. It occurs in those small wetland ponds that have openings that have broad-leaved sedges, carrot species, and that's what it uses as a host plant. This is another one that occurs down the East Coast and then up the Mississippi Valley up into the Great Lakes region. And we had exactly one known population ever from the state of South Carolina, and that was at a small wetland just outside of Summerville, practically next door to Interstate 26. Ron Guttrell found this population. That entire area is now developed. The habitat doesn't exist anymore. We have been looking and looking and looking to try to find the two-spotted skipper in other similar kinds of places, particularly in the Francis Marion National Forest. And we just haven't been successful. It is still known from some spots in Georgia, fairly close to South Carolina, and it's still well established in Florida. So this is another one that we keep our eyes out for, but we think it's gone.
So, as you can see there, Brian has not been able to find it, and if someone in the state was going to find it, it's going to have been Brian. Um, but you see, the thing that I'm really good at is being obsessive compulsive and really drilling into obscure, hard to figure out problems like this for species that nobody really cares about. I did it with the intricate satyr, I did it with Zagomys clarinus, and I want to see if I can make some headway with two-spotted skipper. Not because I'm trying to prove Brian wrong, but because Brian wants to be proved wrong, because we want this species to still be in the state. So I'm going to give it the old college try and see if I can make any headway on this problem just by going through and doing GIS analysis and finding potential sites in the general area of where this prior known population was to see if I can locate suitable habitat, and if I can locate suitable habitat, locate the skippers. Which brings us to the host plants that this uses and where we might be able to find those. All right, so real quick, let's just go over the two-spotted skipper. Here's the species, Euphes bimaculata. And as you can see down here on the map, this is the Butterflies and Moths of North America, BIMONA website. As you can see, it's known from all over basically this line, whichever latitude this is, running right through the middle of the country, and then right down the coast. And there's some isolated reports from Alabama and middle of Georgia, but then there's some right here between Jacksonville and Savannah. This is the one population from South Carolina, which has no data connected to it. It's just a historical record. And I believe this is just rough because it's showing it over here in Monk's Corner on this property that's not been developed. And if it was there, it would still be there. Where it's reported to have been is right here in this general area, just north of the intersection of 17A and I-26 in Summerville, right over here. So that's where I'm focusing my efforts, and just quickly glancing at the historical imagery, that looks like the place that's going to be the best bet out of anything. So what kind of habitat are we looking for? We are looking for shallow open water wetlands with open aspects that get a lot of sunlight, that have emergent sedges growing along their periphery. At least that's what I'm led to believe is their preferred habitat. We're looking for fields of carex sedges, stands of carex sedges on permanent open water bodies, treeless wetlands with enough exposed emergent plant habitat to have essentially thick stands of carex sedge. And the species that's reported as the host for their larvae on here is hairy fruit sedge, which is Carex trichocarpa. And here it is on Wikipedia. Here is it on iNaturalist, and as you can see, it has never been found in South Carolina. And if we compare that to the Biota of North America project maps, it's never been found in South Carolina. So that is not their host south of Virginia. It's probably not their host south of Pennsylvania. So that brings us to other sedges. So I've just searched on iNaturalist for Carex. And as you can see, Carex is everywhere. Carex is a massive genus. Extreme diversity, really hard to tell apart, real pain in my butt. But anyway, as you can see here, we have Carex reported from all over the place. This is a sedge. The iNaturalist is mostly made of citizen scientists as well as some experts. It's kind of skewed on either end. And as you can see, there hasn't been a lot of sedge reporting because they look like grasses. They're not that interesting. Your average everyday person isn't reporting sedges, and if they are, they're not IDing them correctly, and there's not enough sedge experts out there IDing stuff on iNaturalist. And because they look so similar, the AI is not able to identify it either. But if we zoom over here on Summerville and we just sort of scan the sedges and we look for large broadleaf sedges in sort of watery areas, I think most of what we see is that southern waxy sedge. I've already gone through and looked at this, so don't just take what I'm showing you here right now, but this plant right here, southern waxy sedge, I think this is probably going to be our best bet, but really we don't get a lot from iNaturalist. just over here on Biota North America, looking at the southern waxy sedge. Here's its range. You see it all up the coast, and you can see right here, it's right where the two-spotted skipper is seen. They overlap, so it's a potential host plant. But once again, there's tons of sedges. There's tons more Carex species that grow in similar habitats and all that, so we're not going to focus on the host so much. We're not going to be able to make any headway looking at the host rather than looking at, geophysical, geological, hydrological features of the landscape and pinpointing it that way, which takes us over to LiDAR data. And I haven't looked at this yet for Berkeley County, but this is really good LiDAR, but I don't think it extends to Summerville. We will see if it does. Awesome. But this is from 2017. What we're looking for is digital elevation models from like the early 2000s. Those would be ideal, like 2001, something like that. And I'll also look at the National Land Cover Database to see if we can find land cover data from the 2001. I think that's the earliest they have available. Because if there's open water, it'll show up in the NLCD. And that's big. That's very useful, is to be able, even though that's a fairly low resolution raster, just knowing where there's open water sources, just seeing the pixels that are open water in the landscape is a huge help with working with this, with trying to pinpoint these locations, because we need open water. That's the big thing. And the problem with using aerial imagery for that is if the aerial imagery is taken, say, in the summer or during a drought, it may not show open water because these are supposed to be shallow water bodies. Shallow water bodies on very heavy clay soil that's poorly drained. But if all the water evaporates, you're not going to see it if the aerial images are taken while the wetland is dry. Conversely, if the aerial images are taken after a series of floods, it may show tons of wetlands out there that aren't really wetlands because, say, they're very shallow and they evaporate very quickly. So we have a lot of false positives we're going to have to sift through. So we're probably just going to have to look at a bunch of layers and find the stuff that is consistently there throughout all the aerial imagery, all the historical imagery, all the digital elevation models, all the land cover data sets. So looking here at Berkeley County GIS, I've got this set to the near infrared spectrum for 1999. And this is the DOQQ, the quarter quadrangles, aerial imagery taken by DNR. And this is where I'm seeing the most useful information. So I don't think there was a lot of development in this area in the 90s. It was mostly in like the 80s and then now in the 2010s. So most of this has been pretty sedentary during the time that the population is reported to have been there. And what you're looking at right here is where I think the population is. I think it is in these series of little pocket wetlands here in these cleared habitats, because I also know from Brian, because I emailed him and asked about it. Hey, phone's ringing. Anyway, because I also know from Brian that it was in a fairly open habitat, a fairly open woodland. And as you can see in here, there is a lot of clear cutting because this is all managed timberland. And I think they were somewhere over in these areas. You see these little pocket wetlands distributed throughout? But what I'm really curious about are these right here. These appear to be permanent standing water. And there's the intersection of Highway 17A and 26, and it's just north of it. And we have standing water. And the thing with butterfly observations is they're not like birds. With all sort of these broad scale, observation records, they're in places that either the observer had, intimate connections to, like, say, I was the caretaker for Roxbury Park, so I was all over the property all the time. So all the records I have there is just, a result of attrition. I had so much time and effort at the property that I saw stuff everywhere on it. The other thing is that observers who are covering a large area, generally when they have an observation, it is close to a road. It is close to a public road. And it's a road that they are often on, and they happen to notice something that they had a keen interest in, and they investigated and they found something cool. It's generally not like you see these massive timberlands. Like, you're not going to have a report from the middle of, say, a big timber tract like this, unless the person who observed it was, say, the property manager. And the fella who found this population. Ron Gatrell, I don't think he was a property manager for Mead West Vaco. So I think he probably stumbled upon the site, butterflying roadsides, and this here is Sheep Island Road. As you see right here, right along Sheep Island Road, we have a series of open wetlands that he probably investigated and happened to find the butterflies in. See, this is a 1999 aerial. I think he discovered these in the 70s or 80s. I'm still not sure yet. So we need to compare this to older imagery. Sadly, I haven't been able to find any historical imagery from the 70s, 60s or 70s for this area of Berkeley County, but I was able to find some historical imagery for 1949. And as you can see here, it looks totally different. Like, this is the development that's happened in Summerville in the last 70 years. Boom. Like, oh man. And here's the focus area that I'm looking at. It's this area over, where is it? Right about here, I believe. Wham. As you can see, or actually right up here. Sorry about that. Boom. So that's what it looked like before. As you can see, very open. These are more so wetland areas. You can still see little pocket wetlands like this poking up all around here, but that's a wooded wetland now. You can see there's still standing water right there at that wetland. So that's I'm going to zoom out somewhere. So that's a one to try, is that wetland right there. That's one I'm keen on looking at. The problem is I can't access Sheep Island Road anymore. It's no longer public. It's all closed down. Well, from an extent. You can only get to it up here now. It's private road past this, I believe. But you see there's still some existing wetlands. This is 2018 imagery here. You see there's still a wetland right there. I believe they're putting in a retirement community right here, though, so that's probably gone. But you still see there's some pocket open water wetlands scattered around through here, and this imagery is not perfectly orthorectified. You notice here how the road sort of moves right about here, how it just sort of jumps, 100 feet. Don't worry about that. That's an orthorectification issue. The road didn't actually move. You see this wetland right here where the cursor is, it's still there. This one over here, it's still there. There's still some chances out there. That one over there is still there. If this stuff has not been thoroughly developed, that one is still there. And all of these were on the old Sheep Island Road, which looks like wasn't there in the 40s. Which, if it wasn't there in the 40s, that would explain why no one had found the population, because the road, was built in the 60s, and then the population was found in the 70s, and then it was seen through the 90s, and then development really happened in the 90s, in this area. That could have something to do with it. Another wetland over here is Turtle Pond, right here. This is what I initially suspected just with my gut. You can see one of those wetlands has been extant for 70 years. And that property has not been developed. That pond is a borrow pit. That was dug. But as you can see, that one wetland is still there. There's not a lot of other permanent wetlands that are still extant in this area, because Summerville is developed, very developed. And this is an outdated map. It's 2021 now. This is 2018 imagery, I believe. Or actually, I don't know. I'm not sure when this imagery here, I know is, but I think it might be 2019. There's been far more development starting. Like you can see over here, it's starting. All of this road over here is going to be developed. It's a hot mess. Summerville's a mess. But I think there's still a very good possibility that two-spotted skipper's out here in some of these pocket wetlands on the Mead West Vaco properties. And I'm keen on trying to get where I can. Whether or not I get arrested or not, we'll find out, to see if some of them are still there. I know Brian has probably picked all the low-hanging fruit. He's probably been to all of these wetlands over here along Sheep Island Road already. I'll have to ask him about that in greater detail, but I want to see what I can do. I want to see what I can find. I want to do some analysis, find depressional wetlands all throughout this area, catalog them, and have them somewhere, at least that I can get the data to Brian so that he might be able to send a grad student after this or something, because I just don't have the time. But I could try a couple of sites. The flight period for this butterfly is between May and August down here in the south. So it's currently March, so I got time. So I got 2 months to figure this out. And if we're lucky, maybe we'll rediscover a species for the state. We shall see. You're gonna come along for the ride. And I guess next steps is I'm going to be looking for data sets, doing some analysis, comparing the historical imagery, and finding the best possible target sites. We're looking for open water with emergent vegetation. Permanent, or not necessarily permanent open water, but open water with emergent vegetation. I guess it has to be a permanent water body because it needs water there in the summer months. Otherwise, it would be taken over by trees if it was too shallow. So, yeah, I guess let's get to it. Alrighty, I've spent about an hour playing around, finding data sets and all that, and I think we got a good start. So, as you can see here, I have a statewide digital elevation model, but as you can tell, it is very low resolution. So it basically just tells me that Summerville is, well, at least the east side of Summerville is located on a pretty high sand ridge right here, kind of distinctly out from everywhere else in the area. And this is just based on the elevation. I've got this scaled to whatever I've got it, not that, to 0 to 100 foot. I think I actually changed it to 20 to 100 foot, just to give me 0 to 100, just to give me a better resolution so I can be able to pick out stuff. And as you can see, the resolution on this digital elevation model looks like they approximated between various elevation points because it's not very good. It just sort of gives me topography. But as you can see, Summerville is right on top of this sort of finger arm geological feature, which is not like any other spots in the rest of the state except for this over here on the other side of Berkeley County. So that in and of itself is unique. Also, this big flat area up here, it's not a plateau, that's a lake. You see. So I'm going to be focusing my analysis on just this peninsula right here, from basically everything north of Interstate 26 all the way up to Lake Moultrie. Just because that makes sense from a hydrological standpoint. This other area over here is probably also a good bet, but just sort of geologically, I'm focusing right here because that's kind of the core of it. So I was luckily, by looking at the tile index, you can see that the 2017 elevation model does extend up into Summerville for Berkeley County, which is awesome. So that's a fantastic data set, so I'm glad I was able to capture that. So I downloaded component rasters for just the core area because I wanted to do this quick, and it's very tedious to download them because I don't know how to code, and I don't know how to code something to batch download, so I have to do it manually. And I'm too lazy to learn, even though it would save me time in the long run. But anyway, I digress. And I merged all of that so that I can clean it up and get it, all even and nice, get everything aligned as far as their extents and their maxes and mins. And I've got two styles for that. I've got black and white like you see here, and I've also got a pseudo color so that I can better pick out changes in elevation. And if you look right here, there is some really interesting geology and by consequence hydrology going on these little fingers here. And this is the area right along Sheep Island Road here where I'm thinking the skipper was most likely seen. So looking down here, and you can see how new that, well actually that's the new intersection. There's the old intersection. So I'm focusing on this area right here on Sheep Island Road. And as you can see, there's just divots down every single ridge. They're everywhere, all the way around on every single one of these ridges. And there's so many of them and they're so uniform that I cannot imagine that this is European. Like, this was forest land, and maybe agriculture. But just judging from the way this looks, I think this has mostly been forest land. And there's these divots everywhere, and I have no idea what causes that. I'm not a geologist, but they're ubiquitous. And if I switch it over to black and white, it becomes easier to see because the pseudo colors are really hard to tell apart in the greens. But you can see they're just everywhere. On top of every ridge, there are these divots, and they're spaced. Oh, that's area. Oops. They're spaced about 500, 750 foot apart, 200 meters. Everywhere. It's weird. But that's what we're going to be focusing on, is the deeper ones of those divots where they actually hold permanent water and where I suspect we may find populations. We're going to be ignoring man-made wetlands because man-made wetlands tend to be very highly manicured, and they tend not to have sedges growing around them because they get sprayed to death. But we have high-quality LiDAR data we can work with, and this is just really weird. And you can tell it's really high-quality LiDAR data because if I switch to black and white, you can zoom in onto these forest lands, and you can see the trash piles from when they've logged this in the past, because these are fairly young forest stands, 20, 30 years old, and you can see the trash piles from where they logged the trees, piled up all of the branches, scraps, stumps, and then burned it. But then there's still a lump in the area, and you can see that. These are like really high resolution. Like I think it's like inches, and it's I think 2.5, 2.3 foot resolution. So you can even see individual like trees on here, like grand live oaks. You can see where they are because the ground lifts up around them on their buttress. You can see all the old road beds, all the old logging roads. You can individually look at, actually, I think this is right here. I think this is artifacting from the rows of trees. I think that's interfering. Yeah, that's interfering with the way that they analyze this LiDAR data and interpret it into a digital elevation model that tried to eliminate trees. But you can see all the irrigation canals and stuff like that. But it's just, where are these coming from? There's just divots everywhere. So anyway, we'll be able to find hopefully I'll be able to figure out how to analyze and pull out where the centers of all of those divots are. But also in addition to just looking at the raw elevation data, because this is kind of noise because there's so much, although it is really good, it's good to have as a baseline. It'll tell us where everything is. I can also look at the National Land Cover Database, and once again I've got wrong button. I've got two sets of styles on here, everything, and then I've got it edited to only show what I think is applicable habitat. And the indigo colors, this stuff down here, and the cyan, those are the ones I'm really focusing on. Those are emergent freshwater wetlands and ponds. So as you can see, there's not a lot of emergent freshwater wetlands and ponds. This sort of gray blue here, this aluminum blue, those are forested wetlands. We got a ton of those. And these tan, those are grasslands. And I think most of the grasslands are, they're clear cuts is what most of this is on here. So I think that's mostly noise, false positives. So we'll probably take those out of here as well, like that. And yeah, you don't want to ignore the forested wetlands because some of these little pocket wetlands are within them. And this is the National Land Cover Database. I think this is like 30 meter resolution, something like that, 10 meter resolution. Pretty big. We'll check it real quick. Yeah, 30 meter resolution, more or less, 30 yard. So not the highest precision. I also have a data set from DNR, which is a little bit higher resolution, I think. No, it's the same resolution, but they did gap analysis and they've got vegetation type for all of South Carolina. But we're just concerned about this little corner of Summerville at the moment. And I haven't dug into that because they didn't include the metadata with the thing. And I've got to go through, because there's a lot. There's 29 different vegetation types. and I need to go through there and pinpoint all the ones that I actually care about. And currently all of that metadata is, I've got that in Word form, and it looks like that, and I'm downloading a 700-page description of the analysis, so it's going to take me a while to interpret that and pick out all the stuff I actually care about. But that'll be the later thing. But just know that I've got base data now, and I've got a pretty good lead on where to go, and I'm probably going to try and find centers of all of these pocket wetlands. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I was living here on the coast where everything is flat. I do very little like aspect analysis or anything like that, or hydrological analysis, also because that's not my job. So I'm not real up to snuff on that. So I'll give it a poke. It's also why I'm doing such a small area to start out with, to just so that I don't run a program or run a analysis for 2 hours and then find out I did it wrong and take me 15 minutes or something like that. I can do it in the background while I'm doing other things. But yeah, these things are weird. I got no idea what they are. Just little divots all over the place. And they're historic divots, I believe. I also need to go download some historic imagery that I can see if I can find some from like the 90s or 80s. I've got to go do the DOQQ stuff, which is even more of a pain to download than the LiDAR data, which is why I'm not doing it. Also, I always have a devil of a time just finding the names of them so that I know which ones to download, and I got to navigate through the DNR site. The DNR site's kind of messed up at the moment. But anyway, I digress. I've got the initial data, and I'm going to keep looking for better data, and we'll see if we can, compare multiple data sets overlaid over each other and pick out the best looking. Oh, I completely forgot. I've got the National Wetland Index on here as well. That one should probably be the best. Right here. This is the National Wetland Index produced by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And as you can see, it's picked out pretty much all of these wetlands. You see these little divots? And what we're looking for is the tan, these guys. Freshwater emergent wetlands. These freshwater forested shrub wetlands are also interesting because that seems to be what they're getting classified for the most part as, but these are the ones that are most interesting to me down here. These tan ones, because those are permanent open water. And as you can see right there, that guy, that's a very promising lead right there. That looks like a sedge wetland to me. See, it's right there, and that's back behind where they're building that retirement community. And that was actually the one I had sort of coarsely picked out. You can also see there is a utility easement running right by there. If you look right there, appears to be standing water in that utility easement. So that's another spot to check. I don't know whether or not that shows up. Yep, that shows up as a forested wetland, which is definitely not, because it is sprayed to death. And over here too. So yeah, making progress. Didn't take me much time at all. This NWI data set is not the most accurate. It's got some weird stuff on here. Like, it's not the best at identifying the type of wetland, but it is good at finding wetlands. I don't think this is, field. I think this is based off of like USGS, USDA, like mapping and analysis and stuff. It's not on the ground confirmed. Like right here, it's got riverine system. I don't think that, yeah, see, there's no river there. I don't think that's the Saw Branch. Nope, there's no river there. We check it with, against the dim data set. Ain't no river there. Like, not a river. There's a river there. Not really a river, it's more like a creek, but you see, you can't trust the NWI. It's usually not wrong, but it's usually not correct, if you feel me. So anyway, I'm making headway, and I'm going to try and expand this out to a larger area. I've got a larger tile set I want to do, this right here. And so far I've only downloaded that just for the sake of time. I got a webinar in a half hour I got to do. But yeah, I think think we might be able. I think we might be lucky. I think we might be able to find some stuff. So I'm getting psyched. I like starting research projects and then actually succeeding. I don't necessarily like doing the data collection, but I like making the discoveries. So yeah, catch you on the flip side, I guess. All right, as you can see here, I also downloaded soil, the soil survey from the NRCS, because sometimes when you're trying to identify wetlands, looking at the soil series can be really helpful, because a lot of soil series are defined by, hydric conditions in the soil, which are indicative of wetlands. But after looking at this, I'm not really able to pull much anything useful out of it. As you can see, if I say layer some other stuff on it, like the NRCS, they don't really line up that well. They line up a bit. Like all of this red is, of course, forested wetlands. Those show up. But as far as like identifying ponds or emergent wetlands, it doesn't really do a very good job. Comparing it to the wetland index, similar sort of thing. It's tracks a little bit better with some of these hydric soils like this pink and this orange. Still not that great. The soil series doesn't capture the resolution that the wetland index does. And same goes when I compare it with elevation. You get some of it, but nothing. It's soil series is just not high enough resolution. I did go through and I did mark all the sites that I think are of interest. These are just sort of in this general area, and that's everything that when you zoom in on it, you can see it has open water and it's surrounded by herbaceous vegetation, and there's no trees, or these very few trees. And that's what I'm really looking at. This one, not so much. That's more of a clear cut, but I just have it on there. All of this power line right away over here. We have another one right there. That one's a little different. I think those are ruts. That one a little bit too. I'm not so keen on those right there, but I really like the look of that one. And these over here, not so much that one. That one. Yeah. And then there's one over here. It's also kind of interesting. And then one down here, which is really accessible, but it's also kind of developed. It's next to a canal. Yeah, you see there. But it's one that's like right next to a public road, so I can look at that. Same goes with that one over there, without having to wander 5 miles into, private property looking for something where I might get eaten by, feral dogs or some such nonsense. Because looking through all of this all is owned by private landowners, and they seem to all be developers. So chances of one of them, like I was hoping one of these might be, a hunt club or Mead West Vaco or something like that, but it looks like all of it's been sold off and it's owned by developers. And they're probably not too keen on a biologist getting on their property and telling them they have a rare endangered species and they can't develop the land anymore. But I'll try and see what I can do. Really hoping for hunt clubs, but just with the way development is going, there's not going to be any hunt clubs this close to it because people complain. I was hoping Mead West Vaco still had some land holdings, but I don't think they do. This one, sort of far one all the way out there, might be. Check that. Nope, that's a developer. Here's the big one. That's what most of them are on. Is this guy, the Whitfield Company. It's kind of a big name in Summerville. So this over here is, I think, Dust Off 2 LLC. So a lot of private landowners seem to be developers. May not be able to get access. Might be able to get down the power line right away. This is the old Sheep Island Road right here. It's no longer publicly accessible anymore. But I might be able to get in contact with somebody and be able to get back in there and poke around at the very least. We'll see. I don't got a lot of clout, but I got a little bit of clout. I just don't know anybody. I don't have very good networking. But I know some people who do. So, yeah. I think I'll play around a little bit more in GIS, try and narrow down selection a little bit further and pick some of the better sites, and then maybe or at least the more accessible ones, and try my hand at that and see. At the very least, I want to get out to a couple of these promising looking sites and just see what they look like, even if it's just, you know, walking one afternoon down the side of a power line right away and then coming over and looking and then leaving and trying not to get arrested. We'll see. I don't know. I played the fifth. Catch you on the flip side.